Hey everyone, I'm Sugata Naidig, and I lead marketing for our wireless connectivity portfolio here at NXP.
And I'm Neil Condell, and I head up our connected ecosystems at NXP.
Welcome to our first episode of Conversations at the Edge, our new monthly video series to help you, developers and product managers, get up to speed on key industry trends and stay in the loop on everything happening at the edge, from intelligent processing, connectivity, security, AI, and everything in between.
And we're starting off with a season that we're calling Making with Matter.
It's been a delicious few years in the smart home kitchen, and Matter has been the secret ingredient that's really turning up the heat. Watching the industry finally get cooking together, aligning standards, and accelerating innovation has been really exciting. Today, we're going to whisk together a conversation about Matter, important tech trends simmering in the industry, and how NXP serves up a full course portfolio that makes smart home development easier, more secure, and scalable.
So grab your aprons, sharpen your knives, and let's dig in. All right, so making with Matter. So the first thought I had was, let's kick this off with talking about the state of Matter. Let's give each other's thoughts or shared thoughts on kind of where we think Matter is today, where it's progressing, then maybe where it's headed.
Sounds great. Yeah, well, I guess I'll kick it off. I mean, to me, I think 2025 is an exciting year for Matter since its availability. There's a lot of interest in the industry around solving this common problem about giving consumers this ease of use and having devices just work with each other no matter what platform they're using. But I think 2025 is when the reality is actually going to come to play and consumers are going to start to get that experience, as Matter has really expanded over the last couple of years with the twice-a-year releases, right? I mean, we know what it's like to try to keep up with that, but the number of devices, the device types, and expanding out of just the pure home automation into things like energy management, I feel like are really trending towards the things that consumers are seeing as benefits to them in their lives that will drive the adoption of Matter.
Good comments. I love lots that is coming in 2025. Like you said, energy management is a big piece because not only does Matter not only kind of brings together devices and into our lives and to the end consumers' lives and whatnot, and enhances that, but the energy management gives them something more to just put into place, into action that actually does a lot of things, right? From ultimately getting to net zero, but just being able to enhance our lives. Yeah, and for those that really want to be more conscious of the environment and whatnot, be able to just lower our energy usage, but also where it matters, like in pocketbooks, right?
Yes, saving money.
Saving money. And we're going to talk about that, in a future episode and whatnot. But that was one I'm certainly excited about. The other things that are coming that I think will be key, which is part of the journey of making Matter successful, is things like improving onboarding and all those things. And one thing that I really, really have appreciated, it hasn't been full of all successes and everything perfect. It's been a growing experience, right, with all the companies, with all the partners and the members within Matter. And so, since it launched in November 2022, so we're a little over 2 years into it, things have improved. They'll continue to improve, but that cadence, like you said, of that biannual release and just sticking to that and making sure that we're increasing value, I think is a real big key. So
I do too. And I think what we've noticed, I know, Neil, you've also seen the same thing when we talk to the customers in the industry. It isn't so much now about, okay, tell me about Matter. Like, why should I care about Matter? It really is more about, we see Matter. How does our company adapt our portfolio to take advantage of what Matter can bring, but also understanding that we have a current business model and current products in the market. So how do we navigate that? So the conversation itself has shifted, I feel like. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. I think that's very good. Because there's some that were all in at the beginning. Some of the ones, products we're showing here, that are developing Matter controllers or devices, all in at the beginning, and they're in for the long haul, which is fantastic. But then there's others that have been on the sidelines, right? That have been just kind of like, well, we've heard about Matter. What is it? Maybe in the future we'll consider it. To, hey, come on in, Sugata, Neil, maybe together, come and educate us. How can we build Matter into our systems? How can we develop them, and what's the cost, what's the process. Like, they're really looking at it seriously, and the product managers, I think, are starting to actually add it into their requirements and recognizing that this is something that's here to stay. And so I like that evolution.
And to your point about here to stay, I think the other thing that we see is that the big ecosystems are still 100% committed and driving the adoption of Matter, and all of their partner programs, they're growing the amount of devices that are supporting Matter and how they're supporting Matter. Most of them, are serving as Matter controllers. And this whole promise of having devices work across multiple platforms, what Matter calls multi-admin, with Matter 1.4, we saw some of the starting points of enhancing that experience. And I know you've, especially from NXP side, have been working with some of our key partners to drive that, because that's something that the industry is really looking for. So maybe you can share some of your thoughts on the enhanced multi-admin.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love the feature that came out with 1.0, like you said, multi-admin, that allows you to take a device and to join multiple ecosystems. And so you take that same device, you join it with an Apple or a Google or a Samsung SmartThings ecosystem, and others as well. It is a bit of a tedious process because you have to do that onboarding for each and every one of them. And so one of the things that we've heard as a collective membership from a Matter standpoint to improve it is we've got to make that a very seamless process. So have a very intuitive commissioning process, which is some of the technologies that we're working on right now, and there'll be some interesting things coming in Matter 1.5. But do it once, and then have that be able to maintain into any ecosystem control that the customer wants. And I think that will be very powerful because, as we all know, just the prospect of onboarding devices, even to a single ecosystem, can be a little bit overwhelming, and people tend to not do it unless they know it's straightforward and easy, and they don't have to repeat that.
Yeah, they don't want to have to do it multiple times. It's already confusing enough. And then how do you know, why do I have to do it? Is it going to do it properly? What else do I have to know? So these are the types of things that the multi-admin capabilities that are rolling out now in Matter are going to address.
Yeah, the enhanced role bit.
Yeah, they enhanced it at the end.
Multi-admin, exactly. So yeah, there were some initial kind of releases that came in 1.4. It'll be even better in 1.5. And the one thing that we're excited about is there's the big ecosystems, the platforms as we call them, that have substantial Matter controller support and whatnot, and it's growing. They don't have everything supported yet, which is a bit of a challenge as to why not all of the devices have embraced Matter immediately. For instance, appliances is a bit of a big gap that we're working with our appliance customers,
right,
and helping them to find a way to get Matter rolled out.
And we've seen some demonstrations, like at the recent CES, there was demonstrations of Matter-enabled fridges and appliances.
Yeah, definitely, which is awesome. And I know there's more to come, exciting. But how do you control those? That's the key. That's the gap. That's that whole admin aspect that we're trying to help
because that's what brings value to consumers and then also to the product makers themselves.
I agree. And so back to kind of that thought of like, you get the big platforms that are rolling out control capabilities, Matter controllers. You can use voice to activate different things and so on. But the other thing that we're finding is really important is some of these specific product areas are looking to do Matter control capability themselves. And so enhanced multi-admin will actually come in multiple kind of facets. Started off in 1.4, but 1.5 and 1.6 will continue to enhance that and improve that. And I think there'll be a really strong user experience regardless of how a consumer or an end user wants to actually roll Matter out in their home, from just starting with an appliance and having that ecosystem work, and then adding in speakers or other, larger platform devices, and then having all that start to just merge and integrate together in a very straightforward way, especially where we try to take the complexity away from that experience and the end users just, it just works.
Yep.
That's the vision. And I think it's happening. I mean, there's doubters because it hasn't completely arrived yet, but it's getting there.
And, you talking about the doubters, like my perspective, that what I've seen is a lot of the doubt is really coming from media and analysts that are covering and looking at Matter, right? Like the end consumer probably hasn't really adopted that many Matter products in their home yet, where they're really feeling that impact. Most consumers don't have multiple ecosystems like Apple, Samsung, Google in their home. And so I think that this is the right way. The right approach is to figure out the complexities, solve them, and then roll it out.
Totally agree. Yeah, I know there's people waiting on the sidelines that we're just kind of looking at Matter and dabbling in it to, hey, they've got Matter plans. Now their questions are, hey, when do we launch big? When do we really educate everybody at the big box stores or whatever about what Matter is, buy the end cap space and things like that? That's waiting.
Yes.
You just got to get this complexities done. I think
But
it's very good.
now that you talk about the big box stores, that is an area where more needs to be done by product makers and the ecosystems to educate retailers on how to talk about Matter. If you go to Best Buy, like I went recently and it saw the Matter logo on a big TV, and the associate there could not explain what Matter was. So there's some work to be done to really drive the mass market adoption.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's the TVs are a good leading place where I've seen the Matter logo, but you're right. They don't know exactly what it means yet.
So another thing that I thought you could bring some insight into is a lot of times we hear from our customers some confusion around Matter and exactly what Matter does, because sometimes it gets conflated with Thread, with Wi-Fi, other things, but then also that it's the application. And then if you're commoditizing this and standardizing it, does that mean that everybody is on the same playing field, and how do we bring differentiation then? So I know that we have addressed some of those things with some of the demos and use cases that we showcased at CES, and in this lab here too. So would you like to talk about that a little bit, like AI? And
it's a great question. No, I love that. Yeah, thanks for letting me share my thoughts there. So yeah, first of all, I think it's a very good comment where there's some initial hesitancy as to just embracing Matter, just full on, and just updating devices to support Matter. Just because it would get commoditized, right? So it's a very good comment there. But as companies have watched how Matter has been able to evolve and progress, they realize those are things that really should just already have been taken care of today already, right? Plumbing, as we call it, the plumbing's done. We don't really care what's happening in plumbing as long as it's working. So the interconnectivity, being able to speak the same language, a common application layer, which is completely independent of whether or not you're running on Thread, which is that mesh-based, connectivity protocol that runs over 802.15.4, but it is IP-based, or Wi-Fi, which is the one that we all know. It's going to be the most straightforward, to Ethernet, and then others that will probably come along. The Matter is that higher level application that just really wasn't available in a very common way across all of the devices, including Wi-Fi until now. And so that right there, I think, just what I look at that is it really allows things to be taken care of that cost a lot of effort and was really duplicated across a lot of different customers and different standards bodies and initiatives that weren't really doing anything different. They're just doing it in their own unique way, but not really solving plumbing in any other way that wasn't already being done elsewhere. So to your point, that allows innovation to happen on top. And I think, AI is a fun one. So in CES, two CESs ago, we really introduced the concept of autonomous home. Mm-hmm. And that required a couple things. Number one, awareness, and number two, intelligence. On the awareness front, the ability to know where a homeowner was, who they were, what their intent was awesome, because then that information that could feed into systems that can intelligently decipher that and then start to create automations. Right. And
that you as a consumer don't have to pull up your phone and find which app to use to control it, or have the ability or the interest to go and program the automations.
Yes.
And then when you do program automations, when one device fails for some reason, it can mess up all your automations and you don't know what the source is.
Yes.
Of the failure. So
yeah, that there's definitely an ambition to be able to have that ability to take away that scene control configurations, which I do not love.
Yeah, right.
So having something that automatically does it, or at least if you've done it, to be able to share it across to ecosystem controllers, that is huge.
Big step.
When that happens, then we're all in, right? I hope so. Anyways, so now we talked about kind of what Matter is, some of the kind of perceptions and whatnot within Matter. What are the trends that we are seeing just in general that, we get a lot of questions when we talk with customers. They're concerned about things or excited about things. What are trends that you think are notable?
I think I would break them up into two categories: trends about how Matter is being deployed, and then trends about the use cases that Matter is addressing, right? And I think we already have sort of hinted or talked about this, that Matter is not a home automation only. It is about driving the intelligent home and the autonomous experience, which includes energy management and bringing in these other types of devices that weren't traditionally necessarily part of the whole smart home experience, right? But then also how do product makers take Matter products to market? And I think through the last 2 years, there's been a lot of lessons learned in the certification process and how that can be very challenging. And because there's multiple technologies, which is great that we're not creating everything from scratch again. So Matter uses Thread to help power devices that are, embedded devices that have limited resources, or they can support Wi-Fi, or both. But then you also have to get the certifications from the organizations that own those standards. And so our customers find that to be complex and costly. And so I know we're working within these industry organizations like CSA to streamline the process of certification, at the same time not compromising on the purpose of certification, because the last thing you want is for things to not work the way they're supposed to once they're in the field.
100%. No, I totally agree with you. And you start to talk about an area that I'm really excited about that I think would really break open the floodgates on Matter. And that's, things that we're investing in that we hope will be coming later this year, which is the ability, like you said, to certify. And then similar to Thread and other technologies, a company like ourselves, like NXP, we can take our platforms, like some of the ones we have here,
right,
that on these low-cost Freedom boards, but have those powerful platforms. We can take those, we can certify them, and do most of the testing for Matter, and then our customers can take those that are using those types of platforms and build on those without having to recertify that portion. So I think that one will be another area that I know that we're personally interested in. From an NXP
and
standpoint.
CSA already just announced and released their some new programs as part of the certification, the fast track recertification and product family certification. So it's recognized to understand what can be done to help streamline this certification process.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be great. I remember one customer of ours talked about the fact that they're all in on Matter. They've got 4,000 plus SKUs. How do they deal with that, right? So those types of things from platform-based certification and inheritance to fast track and recertifications and portfolios, I think those are things that have been missing that we're adapting now, and I think that'll be excellent.
And when you started this by asking about the industry trends, one of the things I've seen as we've worked with customers and also being on the board, both of us in CSA, and listening to what other companies are talking about, is really focusing more on making Matter super reliable and strengthening it, that it works across the ecosystems. The device types are providing the capabilities needed. So not so much a focus on saying, okay, how many more device types can we add with every release, but more just about strengthening Matter itself. Do you also see it that way for as the focus for this year and next year as an industry trend to really support the adoption of the technology with the existing structure that it has, the existing device types?
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's been a lot of great work, as I was talked about earlier, with the biannual kind of release structure that we have right now, which is getting a lot more of the relevant and critical device types that are needed, from appliances to home control devices to, cameras are coming now, and even your TV, and then potentially audio and those types of devices that are part of the home. But then the energy devices, from solar panels to batteries to EV chargers and so on, like that's starting to really, really touch a lot of the main devices that are worthwhile to try to make sure they're connected and part of an automation. So I do agree with the thought and the sentiment that I do look at this year as taking that work that's been done, a lot of excellent work that's going to continue forward and continue to expand, but then being able to just then start to create that better usability, that better experience on top of that. So the onboarding we talked about, the ability to have more intelligent management and energy management. Sensing is another thing. So knowing where if there's a person present, or even potentially where they're present, was announced. All that stuff can then feed into all of these really exciting AI engines that we can do at the edge now. Like on a lot of our processes, we're starting to enable, have been enabling AI, and now we're starting to actually use those tool sets to be able to apply, into that learning about the environment, who's there, what they're doing, the routines, and just be able to learn from that. And I think that's and Matter, that's all feeding very well within Matter.
It made me also think of security, because I think there's been a very big shift in the consumer industry around how to approach security. A few years ago, before Matter, most companies that were building smart home devices, security was not the top of mind for them. Like, it was, how do we get these devices to market? How do we connect to our other devices? And now all the companies we talk to are really evaluating how do they make Matter work, the security aspect of it. It's going to help them also comply to these regulations that are coming or enacted already in different countries. And so I think Matter has been able to address that foreseen that this is going to be a concern and something that needs to be addressed by the technology, and defining it as part of the main aspect of Matter, that devices have to be secure and authenticated. And I know at NXP, we've been with our solutions, we do enable that and provide security is not a yes or no, right? It's a range of what kind of level of protections you want. So I see that as another trend in the industry about really looking to how to make devices. Now that things are all connected, how do we protect them?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important aspect, especially since, like you said, it was uncomfortable at first. When it was introduced, people said, oh, yes, of course, it's a good idea to add security at the application level. As you know, Matter is a certificate-based security approach, which then requires a lot of other things like attestation, like you said, device certificates, simply being able to say that, hey, have a device, be able to claim that it is a Matter certified device, and then there's a mechanism to be able to verify that. We've never had that before, not at the scale that Matter provides. And so fantastic ideas, but the reality is it's uncomfortable because, as you mentioned, all these companies have never had to do that before. So we're having to go and help them, educate them up, customers about what needs to be done, what NXP can help do, whether it be injecting certificates in devices and the services we provided there, or giving them hardware-based security, or just, advising them on, like you said, the risks, the regulations, not just regulations, but the risks, like, how much security is enough, because it doesn't come for free.
Right.
But it's becoming
the trade-offs.
The trade-offs. It's becoming more and more of a requirement and care about. And as you know, as part of the security, the alliance, right? The Connectivity Standards Alliance. There's another working group which is driving product security, right? And so, from labeling programs that are coming in even in the United States or the EU or other countries, that's starting to drive more and more of a necessity to be able to embrace the security.
I think it's also raising consumer awareness. So consumers are going to be looking for these labels to make sure that they're buying devices that make them feel like they're being protected. Their data is protected, right?
Data is protected. Things are private. They're not going to be at compromise. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a new area, but it's definitely becoming more of a, like you said, a consumer awareness thing, but care about now that people understand that there is chances for risk.
So let me ask you, going back to some of our core areas of expertise, connectivity. I know you come with the Wi-Fi background. I come from the Thread Zigbee background, and we get asked questions too, right, about this Matter over Thread or Matter over Wi-Fi, like which one should I pursue? And, I'm always a big proponent of there's not one size fits all. You got to look at the use cases and see what are the top priorities. If it's low power, if it's reliability, then Thread is the best route for you to go. If it's high data rates or, video streaming, things like that, or it's just you need something that is ubiquitous, then Wi-Fi is the way to go. But what are your thoughts on this? Because I know Thread, to some people, it's still fairly new, whereas Wi-Fi is very well understood. Yeah,
no, it's a good question, and we do get that question a lot. How much do they need to invest in all the technologies or any of the individual technologies? It really comes down to use case, right? Like you said, my actually background was before I got into Wi-Fi.
That's true.
I was actually Thread, Zigbee, and even before that, infrared, connectivity or networking there before Wi-Fi was even ever ratified as a standard. So I've definitely seen a lot of different ones, but having been part of the whole foundation of what now has become Matter from the very early days. Wi-Fi was the one protocol that needed to be solved because there wasn't an application standard like Zigbee, for instance, or other technologies that have the full application as well as the network protocol solved. And so that's why I kind of immersed myself into Wi-Fi, is because I felt this is something that we needed to understand. But back to your question, there are definitely use cases where Thread doesn't solve. It doesn't have enough throughput or bandwidth to do it. Or they need to have, the ability to have direct connectivity to the cloud without going through extra infrastructure devices, which, as we know, with like Thread, it requires a border router to be able to get to the cloud. And then, Zigbee and other technologies similar fashion need to do that. And so, but I do think that Thread will solve a number of different problems for devices, like you said, that have low power requirements, need to have battery life of, months, if not years. And I think that's
the low power is a term that can be used to describe almost any technology practically, but it's about okay, what exactly does low power mean? So
Yeah.
are you trying to like put them in sensors that have to be up in corners of the ceiling that you don't want consumers to have to change out the battery every couple of months, right? You want this to last years.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even things like lighting, I mean, I have Wi-Fi light bulbs at home. Sometimes they go into pairing modes and they start blinking and it drives my neighbors crazy. So I would much rather have a Thread light bulb situation or Zigbee.
Yeah.
You know, like Zigbee is probably that's one of its strong points. It is, and so there's things that are easy to do with Wi-Fi that maybe don't need to be done, right? And even though I would actually say from a trend standpoint, Wi-Fi has shown a lot of resiliency, resiliency to be able to kind of maintain ability to solve the use case. And so lower power, lower cost Wi-Fi chips are becoming, more and more common. And so, Thread kind of, has some specific value that's still separate from that. Like I said, with, the self-healing network.
That's what I was thinking. The mesh network, extended range.
Yes.
Those are some of the use cases that I particularly see as being valuable to have Matter over Thread. And I think, too, like Matter is going to be successful in a home when you have Matter over Thread and Matter over Wi-Fi devices so that you're really getting to take advantage of the entire Matter system. And now with Matter 1.4 having standardized Thread border routers and home routers and access points, we'll start seeing these basic home infrastructure devices support Thread. So then it won't even have to be something consumers need to plan for or look to see if they have the support for it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Because there's things that within Wi-Fi that's not everybody's aware of. You can only support so many clients. And so if you started making everything in the home Wi-Fi based, you're going to run out of room on the routers to be able to support that. And so that's another reason why you want to have a combination of technologies. Now, one thing that I love is devices like this, the smart plug that actually has a single chip that has a tri-radio in it that can actually form. It has Wi-Fi, it has Thread, and then it has Bluetooth low energy commissioning to be able to have a good onboarding process. But I like this type of device because the same chip can go in a smart plug. It can go.
It goes in here also.
Yeah,
sensors.
Contact sensor can go in.
Well, no, sorry.
Yeah.
The Thread only would go here, but it has that to be able to join the Matter network.
Exactly, and so that and so this the same chip that's in this one right here, this RW612, but yeah, so this enables in a minimal way the infrastructure needed to be able to have a blend of technologies, and so that you're not overloading, your AP, your home access points with Wi-Fi devices, because then this can support, hundreds of devices from a Thread standpoint, and be able to enable all these other devices that don't need a Wi-Fi radio, like a water sensor, temp sensor, and contact sensor, like you talked about, in a very minimal way. But this same chip can be embedded in, energy devices like that.
Well, I think the interesting thing for me about that is a device maker can easily use this integrated RW612 or tri-radio and create their own border router device, so they don't have to rely on the consumer having certain devices in their home that will provide that infrastructure. So this is a way to guarantee that the consumer will have the infrastructure.
Yeah, very, very good point. Yeah, because a lot of infrastructure, as have come into things like this power, I think it's called a power station, that you can act as a Wi-Fi charger, wireless charger, as well as a Thread border router and Matter kind of network enabler to the speakers that you see here, and so on. It can come in a lot of different ways. But you mentioned earlier that with Matter 1.4, there's now going to be certified Thread border router capable device types, as well as home routers that will enable the infrastructure as well. So all these will start to work in combination to be able to provide that infrastructure to be able to accomplish the use case in the most optimal way. And I think that'll be really key, and we just got to make sure we do it in a seamless way for the customers.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about Matter, but we started this saying, how do you cook with Matter? And you could see from here that we have these different devices that you see in people's homes, and then kind of the brains behind those. So what role does silicon play in product makers' decision as they look at building these Matter devices? Like, what are some of the considerations they should look at to evaluate their choice of supplier?
That's a good question. And yeah, it's a question we get quite often is, where do you start? So of course, with Matter, you've got devices that are already in the field today where our customers would like to see if they can get Matter upgraded just on the device itself. And in some cases, that works fine. In other cases, Matter does require some additional things. So it requires additional memory space, memory, and things like that. So, because the size of Matter does matter, right? But and so they've got to be able to look at the system to make sure that not only can it run the Matter stack or the code that comes in the open source SDK and whatnot as it stands today, but also as it grows, is there enough headroom, enough room for that to be able to expand? And so that's a key piece, just in general, that makes them kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, so where do we start from scratch? And so the other thing that we talked about earlier is the fact that, connectivity, which use case do we want to support? And so in some cases, customers are already they're with Wi-Fi today, they're going to stick with Wi-Fi, or they're using Thread or Zigbee. Actually, we can talk about that in a moment. They can stick with that today, or other existing protocols, and that may be fine. But in other cases, they think, hey, maybe we want to be able to expand our use cases and add in Thread in addition to Wi-Fi. And that's why, from an NXP standpoint, looking at it just in terms of ingredients, like knowing Matter was coming, we've been involved in it for a number of years before it ever became a reality. Things like this tri-radio-based device, the single chip that has a tri-radio and a processor all built in, are really, really important, because that allows customers to future-proof their devices so that whatever use cases they want to be able to support, whether they need, for the connectivity itself or they want to connect to another device, I think that's the key thing. So in terms of ingredients, to use that metaphor, the cooking metaphor, so systems need to be able to consider memory, processing, security, connectivity, even things like AI and machine learning, which are very important because those will be common in all of the systems. Those are the significant considerations when it comes to silicon selection, which then really sets the foundation to the system and the integration and the innovation that you can build upon that.
And I would add to that and say, the challenges that our customers or product manufacturers have is they need to get to market quickly, and they need to bring innovative products to market. And there's so much complexity involved in having it connected, your device being part of a bigger connected system where you don't control all the other devices or have that visibility, right? And so it's really important to work with companies that can look at it from the system level. How does this device fit? Not just the system of the device itself and how to architect that, but how does it fit in the broader portfolio that you're bringing to market? How are you going to deploy it from the security perspective? And it saves time to market, but also the resource investment. And what we, I think, commonly hear is it's really difficult to get all the expertise you need for Thread, Wi-Fi, security, AI, all these different areas. So a company, where do they invest in developing those expertise areas? So what a silicon company can do is help give you a higher base to start from.
Yeah. And speaking of base, I think the one thing that Matter does, which silicon companies haven't traditionally been responsible for or let's say dependent upon, is creating that up-leveling or that almost vertical integration of the whole stack, right? So some of this application level support that NXP and others didn't really have to get too involved in, it's becoming really critical for us. So that way, things like what I call time to innovation can start to really get improved. And I love what you said there in the sense that, all those other use cases, and what I've always said about Matter is the user experience is really where the battles are going to be happening. Once Matter takes care of that plumbing, the user experience is definitely the key, and that's where the innovation is going to happen. And things that we don't even know are going to really come into fruition and availability in future years right now, because that innovation it's just going to start.
And we're going to talk in our upcoming episode, I believe, about what does it take to go from developing to deploying a product, because there's a lot of considerations to look at and evaluate, and a lot of ways that companies like NXP can help ease that process and enable you to really focus your resources on the areas that bring you the most return on investment as a product manufacturer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a blast talking to you. This is something that's close to the heart for both of us that we both feel passionate about. Looking forward to more to come. Join us for our next Making with Matter episode, where we'll talk about launching a Matter product. In that episode, we will really focus in more details on how to develop a Matter device, certify it, deploy it, and also how to get more involved with Matter. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you for joining.
And don't forget to subscribe. Smash that like button. Did I say it right?
No.
Sorry.